Awesome. We're recording. Alrighty. So this is the orchestration scripts end of quarter video by Kieran and Tommy. So our motivation, so our previous work had shown that PhD research mentors often are kind of unsure of how their kind of student mentees are working on research tasks. And so what we found is that there's no kind of standard or previous work to actually understand how students are working in DTR and in research environments. And so we can't design a potential solution to this problem that PhD mentors face through kind of automating or designing orchestration scripts. We can't kind of design that solution until we have an understanding of how students are actually working and what kinds of resources they're using.
Yeah, so our approach this quarter was to conduct a need finding study with DTR students so we could get better generalized findings and patterns about how they seek help and how they work.
Yeah, and so we kind of started our need finding with a need finding pretest. We wanted to understand kind of in depth around how students were working in DTR, specifically the kind of tools. And so we had a pretest where we observed a SIG meeting to identify a task that a specific participant student would work on during that week. And so we spent that week actually observing through video recording the task that was identified during SIG meeting. And we kind of compiled a basic outline of the task and created a process map through a semi-structured interview where we asked them specifically around kind of how they were working on different kinds of components of that task, including kind of the tooling that they used. And then we also kind of discussed with them the help seeking and struggles of actually completing that task during our kind of interview. We found this method to be effective in actually providing kind of useful and informative findings, but it took way too long. Spending an entire week on a single participant was really risky, especially if we were unsure if we would get good data from that. And so we then tried to reevaluate our need finding through status update. And so, in kind of our status update, we decided to evaluate two different kinds of processes. One was the kind of the same process map interview from the pretest, but without the week-long data collection. And another was an evaluation of all the help-seeking opportunities that a participant engaged with. Both were very effective and gave better understandings of how students sought help and worked on research. And through that, we kind of recommend using a combination of both to actually get very useful kind of information within a short period.
So we came away with 5 key findings from the data that we gathered throughout the quarter. The first key finding was the mentors struggle to identify how students are working. And so students often progress faster in developing their research with more practical insights. We got a lot of information from how students in pairs were working with more experienced partners, being able to stop inefficient workflows and sort of cut out a lot of the area for confusion, where if you already know what to do in research and you're working with somebody who doesn't, you can sort of guide them along the right path. And we saw like a big disparity between how more experienced members work and newer students were working.
Awesome. And so for our second key finding, initially we had wanted to observe if kind of identifying what it means to be stuck and whether an intervention is needed during when a student is stuck. And we actually found that, one, there are kind of no specific stuck patterns that we kind of identified, and actually that being stuck was not actually a problem, especially because really when students need intervention is when they would benefit from help-seeking opportunities rather than being stuck. Oftentimes students overcome their obstacles through being stuck, and since we're working on challenging problems, it is actually often important being stuck, and especially because a person might not be stuck, but still going down kind of and using a poor work strategy or are kind of using a kind of poor approach to what they're trying to work on.
Yeah, and then our next key finding was because of the structure of DTR schedules requiring help-seeking opportunities, there's a disconnect between student and mentor. So we met during SIG with a lot of students and then saw how they interacted throughout the week with their mentors, and a lot of questions and and help seeking opportunities were pushed off until the next SIG meeting. So this created a large gap for students and created a lot of risk. And a lot of students didn't reach out for help during tasks. They would wait till afterwards to like a more general check-in. And this was generally more common with newer, younger students.
Yeah, and so especially kind of this is an important key finding is that while there's kind of an aspect of DTR that is benefited by both being focused on improving learning and regulation skills and research skills. However, there is often a trade-off. Oftentimes, students could felt that if they went to certain resources, such as a partner, they'd be able to get practical advice, especially an experienced partner who might tell them what to do. They would be able to get practical advice that wouldn't kind of block their project. However, they might learn more specifically if a PhD mentor kind of suggested ways to start thinking about a problem. And so one of the things that we need to continue to kind of observe within DTR kind of environments is how students how students deal with that kind of trade-off of learning kind of important kind of skills that will help them later in their research, and specifically using practical advice to immediately advance their research.
And our final key finding was that new DTR students don't know what resources exist, and so they can't find previous work or ways to help direct their research. So we found that a lot of helpful resources were common DTR documents that a lot of older students would use, and a lot of the newer students weren't familiar with these tools or how to find these tools, and so they were left delayed until they could ask for help and were then presented with these tools.
Yeah, and so through this we determined that kind of our next steps is that using the data we've collected and our key findings, we want to finalize our design arguments and begin working towards a prototype system that overcomes our design challenge, and with our new, more passive need finding, possibly continue gathering data while we also kind of design this system and evaluate it.
So our design argument is we want new DTR students to know about, use the practical resources to progress their research, such as experienced partners, previous work in online technical documents, without having to feel like they need to reach out for help. To overcome this blocker of new DTR students being afraid or resistant to reach out for help during tasks, we present the characteristic that while students complete a task, they occasionally ask questions about how they're working, and their answers will be used to categorize them into a different level of risk that their mentor can view and then intervene or help when necessary.
Yeah, and so what we learned kind of this quarter specifically is that more experienced DTR students are less risky in a sense in predicting how they work compared to new DTR students. They kind of work more within the systems and tools that exist within DTR. And that many DTR students often fail to realize if a work process is too risky or needs an intervention through help seeking until they become very stuck or a mentor helps them during SIG or studio, which can be a long time away from actually specifically when they need that kind of help-seeking intervention.
And then some of our takeaways from DTR this quarter was the importance of slicing your work and not doing the least valuable thing, but just taking the most valuable thing and putting it into more reasonable sized tasks. and being able to always address our risks during our tasks and keeping that in mind, allowing that to guide our workflow. And then the last thing, the understanding uh, when you are stuck and that it's not always a bad thing or an easy thing to identify when, where, and when you need to improve, and sort of having that ability to self-reflect during a process or a task and make sure you're heading in the right direction and using the right work strategies.
Awesome. So we look forward to kind of continuing this work next quarter. Thank you.
Thank you.